Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. We have here today a very special guest. I have my friend Andrew DiDonato. Andrew, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's nice to have me. I appreciate you.
Thank you, and I'm glad you could come on, man. I've been looking at your story here over the last couple of days, and I had seen your name a while back, and I just stay so busy with all these things, and it's hard for me to actually get a chance to listen to shows. And I was able to do a little digging into your background, and man, what a story! Before we get into it, kind of just give our audience like a little primer, a little overview of who Andrew is, and then we'll kind of get into your story from the beginning and work our way forward.
Yeah. And listen, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. In my neighborhood, and I was surrounded by organized crime figures growing up, which is very common if you live within the five boroughs. A lot of guys have similar stories. I also had a relative of mine who happened to be a capo in Genovese crime family, and so we had a lot of friends who were on the fringes of society. People wasn't uncommon for, knock around guys coming to my house, coming to my grandmother's house or whatever to see my uncle and stuff like that. And as the years went on, as I got older, I noticed that the guys in the neighborhood, they had children and their children were like me. My dad went away to prison when I was a young kid. So I noticed that their fathers were away as well. So it was kind of normal. So we ingratiated each other with these friendships, and those friendships built into lifelong friendships. And then as we started to become teens, we started committing crimes together. And instead of somebody grabbing us and saying, "What are you doing?" they're asking us, "What do we got? What did we steal?" Stuff of that nature. And as I got older, the crimes just kept escalating and escalating. And then I caught the eye of a local gangster with the Gambino crime family. Happened to live on the same block as his brother, who was also a main member of the Gambino crime family. And I was friendly with his kids. And they called me in one day. It was a surreal moment, brought me up there. They knew I was committing crimes, doing things. Back then, we were robbing cars, doing burglaries, stuff like that, shaking down drug dealers. Um, so he brought me in and said, "Listen, I know exactly what you're doing, kid." He goes, "I want you to know that you're welcome to come here anytime." He goes, "When you're out in the street, things happen. And if you ever run into some trouble, you got a home here. You can come here anytime. You can mention my name, and then they can come and see me if they got a problem with you from this point forward." And from that moment on, I just ran with it. And I knew, what he was about. And like I said, I wasn't a stranger to it. My uncle was involved for many, many years, and then he had passed. He was murdered. So I've seen that life go full circle. And I knew I was getting involved with, but I also knew if I was going to continue on with this activity, I was going to need some sort of protection because I was a young kid still. I was
Right.
only like 17 years old. So um, from that moment on, I was able to use those resources that he had as well. And that opened the door for me with other guys, other crime families, stuff like that, doing other business dealings and making more money, of course.
Right.
And then I developed my own friendships throughout the years. And that's how I got involved with that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Well, interesting story, man. So we got a lot to unpack here. It's your first time on the show. Again, welcome to Crime and Entertainment. You mentioned growing up in that area. What was the area you grew up in? And was
I
your father gone like from birth, or was it a little bit older when he went away?
no,
What's that?
let me see. My father went away when I was a very small child, and he
Okay.
went away for a few years. So my first few years, growing up, my father was non-existent. My father was a gambler. My father loved to gamble. So you want to call it a degenerate gamble? Yes, whatever. Um, so my father, even when he did come home, was never in the house. My father was always out and about. My father and my mother got divorced when my father was incarcerated. My father was in federal prison. He was in Danbury for, I think, the first 4 years of my life.
Okay.
When he came home, I would see him on weekends and holidays and stuff like that. And but he was non-existent in my household. So my mother held it down. My mother did everything. She was father and mother to me all the time. And then she had three kids to raise. So as I started getting a little older, my mother needed some help. So it wasn't too long when I became 12, 13 years old. I was already out in the street doing things I shouldn't be doing, just trying to make some extra money.
Mhm.
And as it turned out to be at that time beneficial for me because I was able to utilize the other kids from my neighborhood who were doing the same and their connections, and I was able to make more money and help my mom. But yeah, my dad wasn't. Not until I became an adult did me and my dad have a better relationship.
Okay. What kind of crimes were you committing at this point in time? Was it just like, little robberies here and there,
Yeah,
smack
we're doing.
grabs?
Well, we did a few insurance jobs of some guys in the neighborhood. We did. One guy owned the video store. It was my first burglary I ever did. I was like 16, 15. I did a burglary, went through the roof. Back then they had video stores.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we cleaned them out of all their VCRs and all their stuff, all their videotapes or whatever. And then he did an insurance job. He got the money back for what we stole, and we gave him back the stuff.
Right.
That led to him telling his friends that these kids can be trusted to do certain things. Next thing I know, I've had guys come to me and say, "Listen, kid, I'm trying to get rid of my car. Can you burn it for me?" I burn the car for them. I get rid of it. I would do that. Then they would give me money from the insurance money and whatever. In my neighborhood, auto theft was a very, very lucrative business. I grew up in a neighborhood where, auto crime legends like Patty Testa, and those guys, Roy DeMayo and those guys
Oh
were,
yeah.
running the junkyard scene, and those guys were selling cars to Kuwait on ship containers and everything. And that's when I first started getting into, stealing vehicles. I was like 16 years old, and there was a guy in our crew who was a little older than me. He used to take me out, steal with them every night. And I started to learn the aspect of, chopping cars and doing that. And for us, that's how we made our money. And I was a young kid making huge money. Back then I was making a few $1,000s a week, for a kid 16, 17 years old.
That's good money.
That's really good money. Before that, before we even learned how to steal cars, we were robbing hubcaps, batteries off of cars. Back then, the bumpers on the Cadillacs were chrome.
Yeah.
Back in the day, so we used to have all the junkyards and everything. They would buy the bumpers from us, $200 a set. I would go out at night. I used to rob my stepfather had a panel van. We used to rob the panel van at night, load it with bumpers and tires from Mercedes Benzes, go to the junkyard the next day, and here we were in somebody's driveway in the middle of the night cutting bumpers off. But we made some money as kids. We're making 4,000 or 5,000 a week just cutting off bumpers and robbing tires. And then we learned how to steal cars, and once we did that, we never looked back. We got
People
a
would be
shop.
amazed at like how the things on cars that are worth so much money. Like I remember watching a show. I watched so much crime stuff; they all kind of blend together. But I remember there was a racket where people were stealing airbags out of cars and selling them,
Big
like
money.
stealing them, giving them, and the people were selling them for $600-700. And that's still a deal because they retail for like 1,000, but they're getting 400 a pop for it, and you're not even stealing the car; you're just stealing the airbag. So just certain things off cars. I mean, it's you can make a fortune in that.
Yeah, you have no idea. And then once we establish ourselves, doing business with the local junkyards and everything, they used to, give us orders at night. We would go out, we would have orders to fill, and we would give them packages. Packages is, nose, four doors, trunk deck, tires, wheels, whatever, interiors, whatever they needed. And back then I think we were charging like 1,200 for, 1,200 for an order. A full package. We would deliver it for them. We would cut the car up. We had a shop in East New York. And then we would do some drop offs. I remember we used to do it for all those guys I was telling you about previously. Like when every once in a while, Patty Testa would say, "Listen, I need 2 or 3 cars." We would go that night, rob 2 or 3 cars, and he used to chop them himself. He didn't need us. So we used to just drop the cars off for him, leave them on a side street not too far from his shop with the visor down, so he knew that those cars were his, and then he would just pay us. And then there were other guys who did the same. We had a guy in Staten Island who used to do exotic cars. We had a guy around our crew who was very good at robbing the foreign cars like Porsches, Ferraris, everything. And we used to sell the motors to them. We were getting like $5,000 just for the motor of the car. The rest of the car didn't matter to us. We were just selling it for the engine. That was it. So we would drop it off, of all places, we would drop it off on Toad Hill in Staten Island. We were going to a house right down the block from Paul Castellano, who was the boss of the family at the time.
Right.
And I don't think he would appreciate it if he knew we were bringing stolen cars past his house like every other night.
Did
But
you guys
yeah,
steal a car from him one time?
yeah, I did. A
Oh
few years.
boy.
Yeah.
Can't
Fast
imagine the
forward,
feeling
but
when you find out that you
oh my
stole
God,
a
let me
car.
tell
It
you something.
was it his car or one of his family members' cars?
Well, it was one of his relatives' cars, and as it turns out, um, we were in a diner. We were in a diner in Canarsie, right off Rockaway Parkway, and we're sitting in the diner. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning, maybe even early, maybe like 12, something like that. And we used to meet Nicky Carrazza. We used to meet him there, and we used to sit in the diner and wait for him to come. So we're all sitting around. There may be like 12 of us there. Another guy, he was a crew member, you know, a main member in the Gambino family walks in. His name was Brother. Brother walks in and Brother says, "You guys still in the car business?" We said, "Yeah." He goes, "Listen, there's a brand new Mercedes outside. It's running." He said, "The guy's on the telephone arguing with somebody. He's not paying attention. You guys can get that car in a second." We walked outside, me and Mike and Ani and another friend of mine named Beansy. We walked outside. Um, we walk out. I stand in front of the guy at the phone booth. Mike walks around the car. Mike jumps in the car. The guy catches the move. He tries to run for the door. I give him like so like a hip check to like get him out of the way. He stumbles a little bit, grabs the door handle. Mike drags him a little bit. I run around the building. I get the chase car. I follow Mike out. We go to my house. We pull up. Now we're laughing, you know, we're just figuring we got the car, whatever. We pull up, and then in the car was we opened up the glove box. There was a wallet, and we opened up the trunk of the car, and there was like a doctor's bag in the trunk. So we take it out, which we usually do because if we're going to chop something, we clean it out anyway before we
Right.
do it. Never expecting to find what we found. We take it back up to my house, and then no sooner, I might have been in the house maybe a hot 3 minutes. The phone rings. It's Nicky Carrazzo on the phone. Now, mind you, I've been with this guy for years. This guy has never called my house, ever. We don't use telephones like that. I get on the phone. I'm like, "Hello? Yeah, kid. You still got that thing from the diner?" "Yes, sir. Yes, we do." He goes, "Well, do not touch it. We got a situation. I'll get back to you in a few minutes. But kid, whatever you do, don't touch anything in that car. You hear me? You understand?" "Yes, sir. We understand." Hang up the phone. First thing we did was open up that fucking bag, right? We're kids. We're not listening, right? So we open up the bag. As soon as we open it up, there's a pistol on the top. And I never forget, it was a hammerless 38. We were fighting over
I
who was
got one
going
of
to
those.
keep it.
I have one of those.
Yeah. So we were fighting over who was going to keep it, right? So we get the bag and then we start looking and we dump the bag out and we see envelope after envelope after envelope in the bag. So we crack open the first envelope, we rip it open, 3,500. Next envelope, 800. Next envelope, 6,000. Next envelope, 5,000. And now on the corner of the envelopes, we see it said Meat Supreme. Now, we all knew at the time that Paul Castellano owned Meat Supreme. So we're looking at each other and we just continue to open it. All of a sudden, my other friend across the table, I forget if it was Mike or Anthony, they open up the wallet and they look at it and go, "This old man in this picture, doesn't he look familiar?" It's like, you know, when you see somebody and you just can't place it, you're like, you know the person? That it was like a surreal moment, right?
Yeah.
So we all look at it and it was like, holy shit. And then the phone rings again, just like in a fucking movie. The phone rings again. "Kid, whatever you do, there's a bag in the trunk of the car, kid. Whatever you do, don't go through that bag." Now we've got money scattered all over the kitchen table, right? So now we're sitting there. At the bottom of the bag was like a ledger book. He says, "Listen, there's a book there. Protect that book with your life. We're going to meet up later on tonight. We're going to get this back to the rightful owner. Guys, I love you," he said. "I would never tell you to ever, ever give back anything you stole in the street. If you robbed it from the president, I would never tell you to give it back." He said, "But with this guy, we got to give it back." So now we're looking at each other, right? But now we're kids, so now we're still stupid a little bit, right? So we're sitting there thinking, how the fuck can we get away with keeping this money, right? And we're sitting there bouncing ideas off each other's, right? We got about 2 or 3 hours before we got to meet him, and we're sitting there thinking about what we got to do. No sooner than the conversation starts to get a little involved, my mother comes down the stairs. She goes, three fucking geniuses. She goes, I hear you from upstairs. She goes, they're going to make fucking lampshades out of you. She goes, fucking give the money back. You'll make money elsewhere. And then she just walked upstairs and we all looked at each other. So what happened was they set up a meeting the next day. We met I think it was his nephew. His name was Bart. Bart was his name, Bart Castellano. We met up with Bart. He came to the luncheonette where we hung out in Canarsie. And we put all the money in rubber bands and we put it back in. We put the gun back in the bag. We took the bullets out, of course. We took the bullets out with us, left it. And then we went to the luncheonette. And for the first time in our lives, we felt like we couldn't trust what was going to happen next. So we, keeping it real, we went to the luncheonette loaded for bear. Mm-hmm. And I remember me and Mike Gotti talking to each other. And I said, Mike, what happens? We can get clipped over this. He goes, well, we're going to go out fucking squeezing. We're going to go out like fucking superheroes. He goes, I was like, okay. So we went there. And then Bart pulled up in the car. And when he pulled up in the car, he got out, came to speak to Nikki. And then we told him we took $10 out. We said we took $10 out because you had no gas in your fucking car. And that was it. We took $10 out for gas. We gave him back the thing. I guess they spoke to Paul. They did whatever. We weren't privy to that conversation. And then the next day or 2 days later, whatever, a van pulls up to my house. And some guy comes up to my porch. And I'm a little, I'm weary, thinking, for like the next 2 days, we didn't know what was going to happen. And this guy knocks on the door. He goes, I'm looking for an Andrew. I said, yeah. I said, I'm Andrew. He goes, well, I got something for you here. And I'm on the other side of the door, my gun cocked. I'm like, well, I got something for you too. And he goes, wait, I'm going to go down to the van and get it. He goes down to the van. He comes up to my doorstep. He's got a bag of fruit in his hand. He puts the bag of fruit, brings it into my kitchen. I'm looking at this bag of fruit. Another friend of mine calls me up. He goes, did you get a bag of fruit? I said, yeah. So the first thing that came out of my mouth, just don't ask me how. I said, how the fuck am I going to pay my bills with fruit? I said, and then we were like mad at Paul like a little bit. We were like, this guy didn't even give us a finder's fee, no nothing. Yeah. And then we went to go see Nikki that weekend. And Nikki goes, you're looking for finder's fees. He goes, you walked away with your life, he said. You're looking for finder's fees? He goes, but I was told to tell you that you've got a favor coming. So whenever you guys got to cash in on the favor, just cash in on it. You'll be fine. And we must have cashed. We were always in trouble, so we must have cashed it like 150 times. Yeah. But John wound up killing him. I think it was in about 8 or 9 months after that incident. And all we kept on talking about after Paul got killed was we could have ran away all of this time, like idiots, right?
Yeah.
And then somebody said, yeah, but then John would have wanted the money. You can't win in that life, You can't win. So
that debt would have carried over to John for sure. And
but it was the real
stroke that Paul had to be able to find out like that who took that car. I mean, we're talking New York fucking city here. You know how many car thieves, like you said, is in New York City, and for him to have the kind of stroke to figure it out that soon.
Let me tell you something, so you know what happened was when, unbeknownst to us, because we already left the scene. What happened was after we took the car from him, he ran into the diner. And he ran into the diner, and I don't know who he thought he was going to see, but he recognized one of the guys that was around Nikki. And he was like, oh, my God, you got to help me. These kids, they just took my car, blah, blah, blah. And then they knew right away it was us.
Okay.
A lot of wise guys in the city at the time used to go to Nikki every time their cars got stolen or they wanted a car stolen or something was missing. I remember there was a wise guy from Bath Avenue a few years back. He came. We stalked this guy for like 2 days. He had a Seville that we wanted back in the day. And we stalked him. He knew we were stalking him. He probably thought we were looking to kill him or something. And he watched us from his window steal his car And then when we left, about 2 days later, he came to the luncheonette and he told Nikki, he goes, maybe these kids are around you. We know your kids around you do this, blah, blah. So Nikki goes, yeah, they took your car. And he goes, well, tell the kids I got a $10,000 reward if they give me my car back because there was something in the glove box. We never found anything in the glove box, so I don't know what the fuck it could have been. But the car got chopped. So we didn't wind up getting the money from him, but that would happen often, that guys from all around the city would come to Nikki every time something was stolen because that's all we used to do.
How did you meet Nicky? Because for people that don't know, I mean, Nicky was a made guy. I mean, he was a tough customer, real big player in the Gambinos. How did you come to meet Nicky?
Like I says, the house that I lived in Brooklyn was 2 doors away from Nikki's brother Jojo. Jojo was also a main member of the Gambino crime family.
Yeah,
And
John told that
Jojo,
story in the movie about JoJo with everything on him. He's like the cufflinks, the belt buckle, the bracelet, JoJo, JoJo. And he says somebody calls his name and he's like, shut the fuck up. I don't want nobody to know I'm here.
yeah.
Cracked up in that
Let,
story.
let me tell you something. He was a really, really good man. You know, he was a good guy. He was very quiet, very reserved. So I lived on that block, so I used to hang out with his nephews. So what happened was, a few of the other guys from the neighborhood were already answering to Nicky, the guys that I was stealing with. So just in basic conversation, when they used to go up to see Nicky in East New York, where we had our club on Pacific Street, they would go see Nicky, and my name would keep coming up, and Nicky would go like, "This kid Andrew, you mean the kid who lives on the block, on Brothers Block? Yeah, yeah. We'll bring him around next time."
Mm-hmm.
And then they brought me around, and then the rest was history. And Nicky was very, very low key, very low key. I mean, we're talking about this guy would go out of his way like you wouldn't believe. He did not like attention. John Gotti Sr. was a much different,
Right.
much different. Nicky hated attention, didn't want attention. Baseball hats everywhere, glasses. We would walk into a place sometimes, and once we got inside, he would go, "Okay, give me your hat, kid. Give me your jacket," and go out with a whole different outfit on
Mm-hmm.
because he just didn't want the exposure. And so he would never even go out to drink it with us. Like we would go out on the weekends or whatever. You know, we would see other guys, wise guys in the neighborhood. They would take their crews out to go to dinner, whatever. Nicky wouldn't go out drinking. Never. But I tell you one thing he did. He was out all hours of the night.
Yeah.
We would be out. We would be at the only people that were out at night were us, anti-crime, and some of the guys from the Lucchese family who were also robbing.
Yeah.
So we were out all night, and no matter where we were, he would find us. And he would pass by in a car and go, "Did you do anything? What's going on?" And if you see him late at night, you used to have to go to his house, bring him a newspaper. This guy never slept. He was in the street 24/7. He knew everything that was happening.
So who is the
Sharp as a
boss at
tack.
this time? Is Carlos still alive? What's the
No,
landscape?
no, no. Back then, Paul was the boss then,
Okay.
and then a few months after that incident, John, John wound up killing him, and um, then it was John from that point on.
Okay. Did
And
in your time coming up, did you ever meet Neil?
yes, I did.
How was
Um,
he to meet? I mean, and I don't know what
Neil,
age you
Neil,
were, but
well, I tell you what, I'll tell you exactly. The first time I met him, like 2 or 3 times in my life, and the first time that I met him was on Mulberry Street. We walked into the club, said hello. It was very quick, very easy. I think it was during the feast one year, years and years ago. Um, Second time I met him, what happened was me and Nikki's son-in-law, Scotty. Nicky was in the city, and he wanted us to pick him up at a certain location. So we drove. He wanted us to meet him in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. We drove to a certain location, and he comes with the car. And when he came with the car, inside the car was John Sr., Gene Gotti, O'Neill, Nicky. That was some car ride right there. That was some powerhouses in that vehicle.
wow.
And I was taking Nicky home in my car, so I met them. So when Nicky was getting out, I said hello to everybody in the car, and I got to see Neil again. And that was a very, very long time ago. It had to be, oh my God, 1983, 80, something like that, maybe 83, 82, 83.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
there's very I mean, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way at all, but like there's not a lot of people that you can just look at a picture of and just a picture will scare the shit out of you, just the way they look. Vito Genovese was one and Neil was one. Neil just had a look like that was not a guy you wanted to have to go meet, especially if you were in the wrong or if you've done something bad.
I got news for
Yeah.
you. In our crew, Neil was everything.
Yeah.
Nikki and Lenny had such a respect for Neil that Neil in our crew, talking about Neil was like talking about God.
Yeah.
Neil was everything. And, so we being the younger generation, we carried that respect for him as well. So when we would hear them talk about him, it was a no-brainer, and that's how we were. And same thing with Fat Andy. Same thing with Fat Andy. Fat Andy was a legend, and in our crew, we had nothing but the highest respect for Andy because Andy used to be Nikki and Lenny's boss.
Mm-hmm.
And coming up in the street, Nikki and Lenny were around Fat Andy, and Fat Andy, if you know anything about the street, that guy was a fool. That guy was a one-man record show.
Yeah, we've had his son on a number of things with Crime and Entertainment, Anthony Ruggiano Jr. So he's a friend of the show, and we've done a lot of stuff together, and got some stuff still coming up together pretty soon. Yeah, he's got an interesting story as well.
Yeah, he's got a great story.
Yeah,
and he would know. I mean, he was in the right place. I mean, he was in a situation where he was around his father, where I can't even imagine the kind of education you get from that. That's got to be amazing, and then of course the guys in Queens, they loved his dad, so they ingratiated themselves with him as well, and so he was able to be in a good position. I ran into him. I think I was on the run the last time I seen him in the street. I was on the run at the time. I don't know if he would know I was on the run, but I was on the run and they called me in. I think had to meet Nicky at Rockaway Beach, and I met him, and then he wound up being there. Anthony wound up being there, and I think we were both waiting to see Nicky. And that was the last time I seen him in the street because I got pinched not too long after that.
Okay. Now, you were doing a lot of carjackings. We mentioned earlier about Roy DeMayo. Did you have any relationships or dealings with Roy?
No, as a matter of fact, one of the guys that taught me the game, who taught me about the car game, he was an older crew member of ours in Nicky's crew, and I used to go out stealing with him every night. He used to steal with them, and he had a relationship with them. When I started getting into the game, Roy had just been murdered. I think Roy got murdered in like January of '83.
Okay, yeah.
And I was just coming up in the game then. But all the guys that Roy wound up doing business with, we were doing business with at that time. So I came in on the tail end of Roy's life. So I didn't have any dealings with him. There were a few guys around Roy that I did get to meet. Like Fast Eddie Randini, the Testa brothers, of course. In my neighborhood, they were legends. The Testas were legends, and rightfully so. I mean, they were like 10 years older than us. And in our neighborhood, talking about them was like talking about you're talking about like the boogeyman. Like those guys were like serious dudes, and but as kids, you wanted to be like that because this is the life that we chose, and these are the things we did, and so we used to always keep an eye on what they were doing or whatever. And they wind up going. I think they went away in '89 on their case. But I remember when they beat their first case. I remember there was a guy in the neighborhood named Dom. Dom was Patty's next door neighbor, and he came to the club to let us know that they beat the first case, and then it didn't make any difference because they had so many murders on that case that there was no way for them to get away from that. They had so many homicides on that case.
Yeah. Well, had he not been killed, I'm sure Roy would have gotten picked up at some point because, I mean, a lot of people went into that
100%.
basement of that Gemini lounge and never came back out. And Paul was, and this is essentially from what I've gathered and, the information, Paul was, not so sure, I think, about, Roy's ability to maybe hold up or not talk. And that's essentially what led him to be taken out. And
What
Roy
I learned
knew it.
about the life the most, well, the thing that I learned most about the life is that when you are a force to be reckoned with, and you're a guy who they can't control, you're not long for this world.
Right.
Because once they fear you to that point where they fear you because they can't control you, they're gonna kill you.
Yeah, it's a
And
fine balance you got to hold. And like you said, he knew that Roy. I mean, people were scared of Roy. I mean, and I don't know this
scared
to
to
be
death.
fact. Maybe you can shed some light on it. I've heard that John Gotti was even given the contract in the beginning to take Roy, and he passed on it.
Hey, I'm gonna tell you a story. I was telling this the other night to somebody. I don't know why it came up, but we were talking. And I remember, I don't know if it was Lenny DiMaria's daughter's wedding or what it was, or an engagement party. We were somewhere. I think we were in the El Carib in Bergen Mill Basin. We were in the El Carib, and we were at one of these affairs. And I remember we were in the bathroom. We were in the bathroom. And I remember being in the bathroom, and Joey Testa was in the bathroom. It was me and a few other guys. And if I said 3 words to Joey my whole life, it was a lot. It was hello, goodbye, very respectful. Guys like that back then, you only talk to them if they wanted to talk to you. You know what I
Right.
mean? And so I sat there, and somebody had come into the bathroom and told him that John wanted to speak to him because I think John was at the affair as well. And back then, John wasn't the boss,
Mm-hmm.
or he was just becoming boss, whatever it was. It was so long ago, who remembers? But I do remember Joey's response. Joey turns around and Joey goes, just tell him I'm with my family. It ain't going to happen right now. So nobody else could do that to John.
Right.
Guys, guys got fucking guys got in trouble for less. But they were a different breed. They really were. And when you think about that scenario, it was a perfect storm for them to survive because that's how they got to Roy, through them.
Yeah.
And that was their ticket out. That was their ticket to go where they had friends. Most of their friends were with the Lucchese family.
Right.
So it was a perfect scenario for them to switch sides, which they did.
Yeah. And
And
it worked out for him.
it did. It did. It worked out for them as well. And they wound up getting straightened out with the Lucchese's, I think, in 1988. Many years after that, after they got released. And then they wound up being with Gas Pipe, who was another, Gas was another guy who,
Yeah.
you know, he would have
Homicidal.
a dream about you. Yeah, he would have a dream about you, and then you were dead the next day. I mean, that's how that guy rolled.
Yeah, Roy,
Um,
Gas Pipe, even though they're in Philly, Nicky Scarfo, some of these guys, they were just, they had that any inkling, like you said, it could be a bad dream and they're going to kill you just because they had that in a dream. It was just
yeah, listen. They didn't pull no punches. And they did it the same way that me and you would go about doing other things.
right.
So it's just automatic. There's no like whatever. They just so quick to it that they do it the same way you go to open up a soda or you go to do something. It's like effortless for them. They got it down to a science. Um, but in my neighborhood, those guys had the utmost respect and fear. Of course, guys were scared
Oh,
to
yeah.
death of them. You
Well,
know.
in 83, I reported there was a situation where you were in a car. I think it was JoJo's car. JoJo might have
Yeah,
been on the lam at the time. And you got a guy
the
that comes
father, the
up to
father was the father was on the run.
yeah, the father was on the run. And there's a situation where a guy runs up to the car with a butcher's knife.
Yeah, yeah, it happened. We were out all night drinking. We were out all night, and we stopped at the diner, the same diner where we robbed Paul's nephew's car, because it was right in our wheelhouse. That's right in our
Right.
neighborhood.
Yeah, that's in your neighborhood.
And so we're at the diner. We're leaving the diner. I never forget. I'm in the passenger seat, and we're driving. We're going home. Now we lived in Georgetown at the time, which is right off like Flatlands Avenue, not too far, right off Ralph Avenue. And so we're driving home, and I think we were going down 80th Street. And I was nodding out in the car. All I remember is that I was falling asleep. I had my eyes closed. I was relaxing. And I woke up to hear the cursing in the car. And Joe, I think it was Jojo and Rocco. Jojo was driving. And next thing I know, the guy next to us, we get to a red light on 80th and Flatlands. and the guy gets out of the car and he's running up my side of the vehicle and he's got a butcher knife in his hand. And now they wake me up. Drew, shoot him, shoot him. And I look in the side view mirror and I see him coming. So I just take the gun out of my pants. I rolled down the window. I turned around. And I shot him twice in the groin. Boom, boom, 2 shots. And I remember, all I remember is that when we drove away, there was a bus stop. And I remember I threw a few more shots in the air because we did see some people at the bus stop. And I wanted to make sure that they were going to scatter, which they did. And we drove away. We got away. And then the next day I got called in to Nicky and I got in trouble for it. And I explained to him what happened. And I explained to him that it was just one of those scenarios where, unbeknownst to me, I was sleeping. I didn't know how it transpired. All I know is they woke me up when the guy started running up on the car.
Right.
And so, long story short, he told me, he said, listen, kid, you got to learn how to walk before you run.
Yeah.
He goes, we can't have these things going on. If you're sent to do something, it's a different story, but we can't have you doing this.
Right.
He goes, my brother's got legal problems. I think Jojo was ducking a subpoena back then or something.
Yeah.
And he goes, my brother's in Florida. He goes, my brother wants me to send him your head. He goes, instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give him a gift. I'm going to send you to Florida so you can torture him, he said. And I wind up going down to Florida. And when I went down to Florida, I think they found out through another friend of ours what hospital this guy was in. And they sent somebody there. I think they sent one of JoJo's guys there. I think they sent Johnny Bino there. That was who I think they sent. And Johnny Bino walked into the guy's hospital room and he had a conversation with the guy. And he told him straight out, right? He goes, he says, just want you to know that we're very happy. Looks like you're going to pull through from your gunshot wounds. He says, but, gunshots are very tricky. He says, you can get a bad infection and die when you leave the hospital. He says, things do happen to people after they leave the hospital, even though they survived the initial shooting. He says, but you know what? Don't think about that now. I got a few dollars for you. Take this money. Take your family on vacation. Clear your mind. Take it as a gift for surviving. And the guy took the money, and we never heard from him again.
Did it bother you at all to have to pull the trigger that first time?
Well, you know what? I just did it automatic. It just happened, and I did it. I was in a few shooting incidents back then. Not too long after that one, I wind up. We were having a beef with guys that were around Gas Pipe and Vic back in the day, and I must have told the story a dozen times, but
that's when they fired on you. You were talking with somebody at the car, and they were fired on you.
Yeah, I was talking to Nicky.
Yeah,
I was talking to Nicky, and it just so happens that being that I was talking to Nicky, it turned out to save my life, because if it wasn't Nicky in the car that I was talking to, there's a good chance that gas would have killed me.
Right.
Very good chance. So, make a long story short, I'm outside the bar one night. It was not too long after that incident, and we had a beef with the guys around them, and I'm standing there talking to Nicky. It's like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden I hear a gunshot, and I see the bullet hit the windshield. I look, and I see a guy on the corner, and I see him standing there taking shots at me. Now another shot goes, but he missed the car. So what I did was I shoved Nicky's head down. They drove off to get Nicky off the scene. I took out my gun. I started running towards him. I started throwing shots, and he started running up the block. So he started running up the block. Couldn't, he was already halfway down. He had a decent head start on me. So I got down on one knee in the middle of the street. I see the car backing down the block. I could see it backing down the block because they were hitting other cars. They were backing down so fast. And I emptied my clip. I reloaded, and then I started walking away. And then the other friends of mine came out of the bar, and we had a club about 2 blocks away. We walked to the club, and then through the grapevine, we found out who it was. And then we were in the club with Nikki. And then Nikki said, teach that guy a lesson. So next night we went out, we stole a car. We knew who, we found out who it was, you know, where it came from. We stole a car. We loaded up. We sat in Scott Patchy, not Scott Patchy's. I forget the name of the funeral parlor on Flatlands Avenue, like 100 and I forget what street it is. I forget the exact street, but there's a big funeral home there. It's very popular in Canarsie.
Mm-hmm.
And we sat in the parking lot in the car. We waited, and we seen them coming out of this bar. There was a bar on Flatlands Avenue called McCann's. Now, the McCann kid was related to Vic, the kid who owned the bar. They were related to Vic in some way. I think through Vic's sister or something like that. And they got into a U-Haul truck. So they get into a U-Haul truck and they go to drive away. We came behind them in the U-Haul truck. So when they stopped at the stop sign, we were able to go to the left of them. So we got out of as soon as we got on the side of them, my friend Richie's in the front seat. He throws the first shot into the engine block with the shotgun. Stops the truck where it is.
Stops the cold.
Yeah. I reach over. I start throwing shots into the cab. And my friend Albie, who was still alive at the time, he was on the other side, throwing shots over the car. We drive off. We get away. We get into another car. We had another car waiting for us. We get into it. We drive away, not knowing what happened, who was hit, who was not hit. You know, we find out one of the kids is hit, but nobody's dead. Mike Gennady goes back to the scene. He burns both the cars so that there's no evidence or whatever. He burns both the cars for us, and we lay low. And then what happened was that's when Gas asked for the sit down, and that's when Gas wanted me and for that shooting. And then that's when Nikki throws the ace in the hole saying, you're looking to kill this kid over the fucking shooting. Meanwhile, I was in the fucking car when you guys started throwing shots.
Yeah.
And that was it. And that's what saved my life right there.
Wow.
And that's how it turned out for me. And I got very lucky.
And
I got very lucky.
During this time too, you're doing some bank robberies. There was an interesting story I heard you tell Gary Jenkins, I think it was, about a robbery where they actually, luckily for you, they had it listed as like a woman being part of the robbery or something like that.
Yeah. Oh my God, it was so fun. I don't want to laugh about it because we probably aged that woman 30 years. But what happened was we did the bank robbery, and we clocked the Brinks truck for like 2 weeks. We knew the Brinks truck was dropping off the money there. It was a holiday weekend. We waited. They came in. They were right on time. They dropped the money off. They pulled it in. We waited for the guy to exit the bank. I walked in, had baseball hat, sunglasses. I walk in, I jump the counter, get the bags. There was like some good Samaritan guy who was coming towards me. He didn't know I had somebody else in the bank. They threw him to the floor, and we started heading for the door. As we heading for the door, some woman was coming in. When she came in, she caught the move, and then she turned around and ran out screaming. We ran out right behind her. So any witnesses that were in the parking lot, the first thing they said was a man and woman came out of the bank. So now we got the police scanners on, and now we're in the car. Once we got to our location, which was like 5 minutes from the bank, like 3 minutes from the bank, excuse me, it was just a shot down the road. We hear on the police scanners that they pulled this woman over on Route 9 in New Jersey, because that's where the bank robbery was. And they pulled her over, and now they were taking her to the army barracks. And this poor woman's whole day was ruined because now they think that she had something to do with the robbery. And we couldn't help but to laugh. We were in the house eating sandwiches, and we were hysterical listening to this over the scanners, right? And everybody's saying, maybe we should put some money aside for this poor woman, because this woman, we should give her a cut. She's taking all the weight, right? So that was like a standing joke, But yeah, that's what happened.
How much did you guys get away with?
Almost half a mil.
Now, I mean, back in those days, did you have to worry like, die packs, mark bills? What was the biggest, worries
Well, the
hitting
reason
bank?
why I didn't worry, well, the reason why I didn't worry about die packs or anything is that the money was still in the bags from the Brinks truck.
Okay,
It
yeah,
never had
you
a
didn't get it
chance to
from
hit.
the bank. Okay, so you robbed the
Yeah, I didn't
truck.
get it. I didn't get it. Yeah. So what happened is when we got hit with the charges, I thought they were going to hit me with robbing the actual truck because technically the money never made it to the bank.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So so we did that, and then there was a few funny stories. We did a bank burglary in Yonkers, New York. Me, Benny Geritano, um, Benny Geritano, Gerard Bellafiore, a few other guys, and may Gerard rest in peace. He passed away. Um, but we did it, and on the scene we had a guy with us, right? And he robbed down maybe like a quarter mile down from the bank. He robbed construction equipment, and they were going to use a backhoe to drive through the bank wall and push out the bank box for the night deposit. So what happens is robs the machine. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. It's a big shopping center. The only thing that's open is a supermarket. The supermarket was still open on the other end of the parking lot. We go through the building with the fucking backhoe. You die laughing. It was like a comedy. We go through the building with the backhoe. He spins the backhoe around inside the bank, pushes the box out, but he hits a fucking bearing wall. When he hits the bearing wall, the fucking building's collapsing around us. Me and Benny are outside. We're standing on a pile of rubble, and we're fucking hysterical laughing, right? We're looking at each other, fucking hysterical, right? Now we get into the car. We're driving back to Brooklyn. The whole way back to Brooklyn, all we're doing is fucking laughing. Well, come show you how the government works. Fast forward a few years later, we all get indicted for bank robberies, this, that, the other thing. They had that bank robbery on the indictment, and they said that 100,000 or something like that, 60,000 or 100,000 was robbed from that bank. Bro, we didn't get anything. We got bricks. We were standing on bricks. And so I guess they did it for the insurance money.
Oh
But
yeah.
man, what a story. What a
Yeah.
story. We laughed. We were in the car. Nobody would have thought we were leaving the scene of a bank robbery because we were fucking hysterical.
No, the
You know,
government's gonna get their piece too, just like anybody else, man. If they see that
without a
those
doubt.
guys you were talking about
What do
earlier,
you think?
sure.
What do you think? You think that when these robberies happen, they don't amp up how much was missing so they can make money?
Yeah. And you think how many people do that unknowingly? I mean, they might know what they're doing, but like even just an insurance, a deer hits your car, so you got a $500 deductible, right? You take it, you get an estimate. The estimate's like, look, I know you got a $500 deductible. I might can do the damages for 1,000, but we're gonna beef things up 1,500. Cover your deductible. You're gonna cover it, and
Years
they'll work
ago,
out something.
years ago, we were in the repairable business for cars. So years ago, what people don't know is years ago, you could buy a car, a stolen recovery. You could buy a car that was, you know, owned by an insurance company or a salvage yard.
Yeah,
You buy the car, it's got a salvage title, big deal. Sometimes it didn't have titles. You would have to go to police inspection after you got the car fixed. So we used to buy the cars, rebuild them with stolen parts, of course, and then resell them to the public.
yeah.
It was a lucrative business. Guys were making really good money doing that. It was a nice hustle. It was a good way to make some extra money. So we did that for a long time, and then what would happen is we would go to just say, when we were building the car, we would build a car, and then some of the guys would register and insure the cars in a family member's name. And then what they would do is they would do an insurance job on the car to even make even more money.
Yeah. Get it fixed,
So
do an
then
insurance job.
So now what happens is once the car is reported stolen, you tell the tow truck company, we want it brought to this body shop. They go to that body shop. We already have the parts for it in a nondescript garage somewhere. It goes there. The adjuster comes down. We give the body shop guy $500 to give to the adjuster, gives it to him. The adjuster gives you 80% of what the car is worth, but he don't total it. That's the whole idea. The whole idea is for him to give you, say the car was worth 25,000. He would assess the damage as 18,000.
Just under the line.
Just under the line where it's not totaled. You give him his 500. Soon as he does that, you bring the parts right back to the shop that you already took off. Boom, put them back on. Now the bill paid for itself. Now your family's got a car to drive for a while, and then you could sell it for the full market value. We had guys in our crew that were buying 2-3 cars a month. I did it quite a few times as well. And I had the National fucking Auto Theft Bureau come to my house. It was a fucking joke. Listen to this. I built this Seville. It was a 1984 Seville. And I built it. After I built it, I sold it to Nicky's son-in-law, Vinny Dragonetti. He took the Seville for me. I think he gave it to his sister. But as soon as he gave it to his sister, he did an insurance job on it. When he did an insurance job on it, they were investigating it, and the National Auto Theft Bureau comes to my house and get a knock at the door. He introduces himself, the guy. I said, "How can I help you?" He says, "I'm with the National Auto Theft Bureau." I said, "What the fuck is that?" He goes, "Well, we're an organization. We investigate."
I can see your thumb in there. It's blocking you.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So,
You're good.
long story short, he comes into my kitchen. He goes, "Listen, you got this car." He shows me the car. He goes, "This is what the car looked like before when you purchased it." He had the car down pat from the day that I bought it from the salvage yard.
Right.
It was a stolen recovery to build, to begin with. So I built the car. He goes, "Do you have any receipts for this car?" And it just so happens that I had 2 or 3 receipts for. Back then they had cigarette lighters in the cars, and I had the receipts for the cigarette lighters. I said, "Well, I didn't think I was going to have to keep receipts, sir." I said, "So I just have these." So he goes, "Listen, I'm going to tell you this now," he said. "This is the 3rd or 4th insurance claim put on this car already." He says, he asked me if I knew Vinny's sister. I said, I just sold them the car. I don't know them personally. I don't know anything about it. And I let it be. And he goes, "Well, I just want you to know," he says, "if you're going to be in the repairable business," he goes, "for now on, if I was you, I would keep every receipt." He says, "because this isn't the last you're going to hear from me." And he put me out of business for me to go and buy him, because I knew from that then on, what he was telling me was that I was on the hit parade, that it was a wrap. They were gonna lock me up or whatever. They had me in their sights. So I went partners with 1 or 2 other guys later on with other builds that we did, but I didn't put it in my own name.
Right. You had to be on the backside of it.
Yeah, because they were on me. I couldn't do it.
Right.
And I got lucky with that one.
There was a situation where I think it might have been a weed deal that went on with Robert Arena.
Yeah.
So did you guys rob from someone?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. What happened was, I'll make it plain and simple. There was I had a mutual friend of mine who, his name was Mike. We were away together.
Mikey
And
White?
No.
Okay.
His name was Michael Bellino.
Okay.
And me and Michael Bellino were away together. And Michael had come to me and he had told me he was having some troubles or whatever. And he wanted to know if he could borrow a certain amount of money. And at the time, I was childhood friends with Wild Bill's son, Billy Jr.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I told Billy, I said, "Listen," I said, "Billy, I just came home from prison." I said, "I ain't got the money." I said, "Michael's a really good dude." I said, "Help Michael out." I said, "He's a street guy. He's going to earn. He's going to pay you back. You can make a little bit of money on him. It's a win-win." So Billy, we lent him the money. And he goes about his business. In the interim of this, he winds up getting pinched again on unrelated charges to what he was already in trouble for. And it sidelines him. He can't pay. He can't do anything. you know. So what happens is I wind up being on the hook for it because I'm the one who, I vouch for him.
Right.
And and he wasn't like he was being a deadbeat. He just had legal problems. He was going to prison. He had to pay for lawyers. He had his hands full.
Right.
And so that's what I did. I took the blunt of it and I started paying it for him. And after that, he got out. He did his thing, but he never did the right thing by me after that. So one day I just happened to be out. I think I was on 13th Avenue in Bensonhurst. I ran into him and I said, okay. I says, hey, Mike, how you doing? We had a drink together. And he goes, listen, he goes, I got something really good. I said, well, what is it? He goes, I got about 2,000 pounds of weed. I said, okay. I says, I could take a 1,000 pounds from you right away. He goes, well, I got 500 we can get immediately. I said, okay. I said, what do you want to meet? He goes, let's meet in Bay Ridge tomorrow. We'll meet at the diner on 4th Avenue. He goes, you pull in with your car. He goes, we'll have lunch together. You leave the keys in the car. My friend will take your car. He'll go to the location. He'll put the weed in your car and then put it back in the parking spot. I said, okay. So me and him sat there. We ate lunch. We talked about old friends, guys we knew, this, that, the other thing, just like anything else. And me and Robert would get in the car and we drive back, to where we were going to stash the weed and everything. And we're doing our thing. And me and Robert get to start talking. And I told Robert, I said, this fucking guy, I says, I like Michael personally. I did like him. I said, but here he is. He never offered to give me anything for free because of the money. He never offered to make good of the money. He's giving me an opportunity to earn, but he's not doing me any favors here.
Right. He's not making it right.
Yeah. So Robert looks at me. He goes, so what do you want to do? I said, it's up to you. What do you want to do? Robert goes, well, let's fucking take it. And we did. So we took it. So what happened was we gave it to a friend of ours to sell. Some of the weed was damaged. If anybody knows about weed, they had it in a location where some of it got a little mildew to it.
Yeah.
So out of the 500 pounds, maybe we were able to salvage like 400, 420, whatever it was.
Right.
So long story short, we go, we do it, and we give it to our friend. He buys it from us. He starts giving us the money once a week. He's giving us the money. Michael starts calling me and looking for the money. I tell him there's a problem. I said, we turned it over to somebody and they disappeared on us. Well, that, of course, started a shitstorm because unbeknownst to us, some of the guys who owned the weed were wise guys from downtown who didn't want their name to be associated with the weed, of course, that they're making drug moves or whatever. And so now there's a beef over it. So there's a few guys who, they go out of their way. As it turns out, they reach out to Nikki. And then they reached out to this guy named Danny Catania from the Lucchese family who Robert was around. So Robert's crew and my crew didn't want me and Robert to actually do anything together. There was a lot of stress amongst
because he was a Lucchese, right?
Yeah, it wasn't only that. There were some other underlying reasons. Some of the guys in his crew were jealous of mine and Robert's friendship. Me and Robert were making money together, and we weren't bringing them aboard. And the same with my friends. Nikki would tell me numerous times, you're making money with these other guys. What about guys in our crew?
Right.
And I would tell him, well, you know what? I offered guys in our crew, but I tried to. Nikki's son-in-law, I tried to take him on a bank robbery with me. You know what he'd call me? Now, this is a guy who's a wise guy. He called me a desperado because I wanted to take him on a bank robbery. I said, well, wait, buddy, we can't all get free money given to us. You're in a good position. I'm not.
Yeah,
I gotta get out there and earn it for a living. And so, but getting back to that, so it put a lot of pressure on both the crews. And then Nikki called me in on it. And I knew it was going to cause a problem. And he tells me, he goes, kid, do you got anything left? I said, I got a few pounds left, Nick, but not much. He goes, but I don't understand why you're robbing this kid. This kid is friends with us over here. I said, last week the kid was around the Colombo family. This week he's around us. I says, I can't keep track. I said, but the bottom line is this is what happened. This is why I did it. And I told him the reason why. I says, and you always gave me the green light to do these things, so I'm just doing them. And he goes, well, I didn't make a fucking quarter here. But unbeknownst to Nikki, like a week or two before that, I had already spoke to Mikey Y about putting money aside for Nikki because I knew he was going to need some what we call in the life aspirin money.
Right. Headache money.
So what happened was I put some money aside, and they called me in about a week later. I went in and I realized that Nikki never got the money, and that's when I knew they had bad intentions for me. Because Nikki was like, I didn't make a fucking course. So what do you mean? I put money aside for you. Now I'm looking at Mike. And so I have to believe that Mike took the money, knowing what the forecast for me was.
So
And then,
when he takes that money, does he then kind of toss the blame on Robert Arena?
well, what happened was Robert's crew. Here's what Robert's crew did. When the guys made the beef, Robert's crew told them, listen, the kid Robert is with us. The other kid, you can do whatever the fuck you want with. So basically, they were throwing me to the wolves, but protecting their guy, which they got to do. Let them do what they got to do.
Right.
So when they came to Nikki squashed it. But Nikki's smart. He's making money on both ends. He's going to make money on them for getting back whatever little product he gets back, and he's going to make money for me because I'm the one who stole it to begin with. Mm-hmm. So it's a win-win for Nikki.
Now, there was a rumor that Robert had took out a guy named Anthony Placido, I think was his name.
Anthony Tough Tony, Anthony Placido.
Placido, okay.
Yeah, which, listen, I wasn't privy to that. All I could tell you was that, I'll tell you, I love Tough Tony. I know Tough Tony my whole life, okay? And Tough Tony was a tough guy. There's no doubt about it.
Right.
He was a tough guy. And Tony and Robert were in Elmira together. So they were friends from when they were incarcerated. So when they came home, we all came home within about a month or two of each other. So when they came home, what happened was they got together for dinners and they would meet for this or that. Me and Robert had the same parole officer. So we couldn't be seen together. So I used to meet Robert. I used to go into, the back of his house. I would go into, places like that to meet him. I would meet him in nondescript locations. I was at his house one day and the parole officer came. I had to hide in a fucking shed because, yeah, I was in the fucking shed.
Yeah, that's violating your parole right there, being around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but here's the funny thing, right? If you go into the parole office in Brooklyn and you go on DeKalb Avenue, you walk in, that's where the parole office used to be. You walk into the parole office, guys are sitting there talking to each other for hours. Nobody says boo. Me and Robert are sitting there talking to each other because we're both going to see the same guy. The parole officer comes out, grabs me, goes, if I ever see you talking to him again, you're going back to prison. You motherfucker. I was like, you racist motherfucker. Now, mind you, I'm not a racist whatsoever. I judge every man by his merits.
Right.
I said, you got every fucking black and Spanish guy in this place talking to each other. You don't say boo. I said, because me? You're going to say something? I said, I know what it is. I'm going to tell you what it is. Because with me, you got to do your fucking job because you got a real criminal on your fucking hands. You're not babysitting crackheads. That's your fucking problem. And he just looked at me like, are you fucking nuts? And I just looked at him and I was like, you fucking... And so I walk out of the thing and I told Robert, I said, did he give you the same speech? He goes, fuck yeah. He said, to make sure I don't even go home with you. I says, I knew they were watching us then after that. And he used to come by with these surprise visits, and Robert's mother, would laugh. She would go, what am I going to do with you if the guy comes in the house? And I'd say, don't worry, you put me under the sink or something. And we used to just joke, it was a joke.
So, but you don't have any knowledge that he was actually the one to take out Tough Tony.
No, I'll tell you what happened. What I do know though, okay. They had gone out together one night. They were seen together.
Mhm.
Okay. I wasn't out, so I didn't know. The next day, I was at Wild Bill's Club on 11th Avenue.
Mhm.
I was reading the paper. I seen there was I don't know if it was the obituary. I don't know what it was. I remember seeing Tony Placido's name in the paper. I went to Robert's house and I knock on the door, and Robert had just bought a Cadillac. His Cadillac was missing. And I asked Robert, I said, hey, what happened to your Cadillac? He goes, could you fucking believe they robbed my car? And I gave him that look like, really? Come on, bro. Who the fuck are you talking to? And I never said a word. I let it be. But me and Robert were so close that I think that the bosses on his end might have thought that Robert gave me the info.
Okay.
And and then what happened was when Robert wound up getting killed that night, it went down kind of weird. What happened was I get a phone call from Mike Gennady the day before, and Mike Gennady tells me to come to his house. He wants to talk to me. So me and Benny Geritano go to Mike's house. I go upstairs. I go talk to Mike. Benny waits for me outside. Mike tells me, he goes, listen, he goes, I got a situation. He goes, you're going to be on it with me. He goes, we're going to do it together. He goes, I need a number where you're going to be for the next 24 hours. He goes, when I call you, you come and no questions asked. I said, yeah, no problem. Just tell me what I got to do. I'll see you then. I stood at the location for 24 hours. I never got a phone call. About 4 or 5 o'clock that morning, a friend of mine called me up and told me that Robert was just killed a few hours earlier. I was that night of all places. I remember I was on 4th Avenue in Bay Ridge. I was at a Japanese restaurant. I went home. I got the phone call. I stood exactly where I was supposed to be. Um, and the phone call from Mike never came. So the next day, I'm driving. After I find out about Robert, I'm figuring I got to go speak to Mike or somebody because Robert getting killed is very, very close to home for me.
Right.
Me and this guy were doing dirt in the street. We were doing a lot of things.
And
I
that was
needed to get,
possibly the piece of work that you were supposed to be a part of had he called you.
yes, 100%. So now my the hairs on the back of my neck are going up because I drive around the neighborhood and I'm coming down Mike's block and I'm calling him on back then the cell phones. We used to have like the throwaway phones, like they were flip phones.
Yeah.
So I call him on the flip phone and he goes, listen, did you pass my house? I said, yeah. He goes, well, then you'll know it's not a good time. I said, okay, say no more. I kept going. Then I put two and two together. So I leave. Me and Mike made a plan to meet somewhere else. We met somewhere else, and then we spoke about things. And I asked him, like, what's the word from Nikki? Did you speak to Nikki? Like, what are we going to do here? This, that, the other thing. I said, the word on the street already is that they're already pointing a finger towards us. Mike's beeper got found at the scene. And Mike told me, he goes, listen, he goes, don't worry. He goes, nobody's coming for you for this. If they're only going to come for you to clean house.
Right.
He says, you don't got no problem with this. He says, but I knew in my heart different. I knew it because I knew whatever. He says, but we got to go see Nikki. I went to go see Nikki. And then Nikki told me, he goes, listen, you were around this kid all the time. You were friendly with this kid. You have to go to the funeral. And I was like, well, I was going to go to the funeral anyway. He said, no, you have to go. He goes, nobody else is going to go from here, but you're going to go. So I was like, okay. And so I went to the funeral, and having that meeting that night is when I knew already from the first conversation with Mike, but now that solidified it.
Right.
Nikki telling me to go to do whatever. Then he gave me ground rules. His was the ground rules. You run into the guys from Robert's crew anywhere, you treat them the same way you always do. If you see them in the danger zones, around your home, around your kid's home, around your grandmother's house, wherever it is that you frequent that's close to your home, you shoot on sight. You don't ask any questions. So that was coming straight from the top. I had, if I seen these guys around my house or around my mother's or whatever, just shoot to kill. And I said, okay, no problem. It will be done. And I went to the funeral, which was very, very, very stressful.
Mm-hmm.
I could see through the mood of everybody that they were holding us responsible. I could see how some of the guys from the Lucchese crew that were Robert's guys, they were very cold. It was very just a little nod, a little shake. Guys that would come up and kiss me and hug me all the time. I could see it. So I went back, I got in the car, I drove. Unbeknownst to me, the FBI was filming who was at the funeral. Because when I got pinched months later, when I got pinched, I think it was like almost a year later, because I went on the run not too long after that.
Yeah.
The FBI showed me coming out of the funeral, out of the St. Bernard's Church in Bergen Beach. They had a picture of me coming out, walking to my car. So, so I knew right there and then. So I went to go speak to Mike again, and I said, "Listen." And then the word on the street was just getting worse, because you could hear the chatter in the background, everybody blaming us for it,
Mm-hmm.
and it was breaking my heart because I would have never gave Robert up for anybody. I loved that kid. Me and that kid I know that kid. We were babies. You know what I mean?
And they killed another kid that was with him too, Tommy Maranga.
Tommy, yeah, Tommy was innocent. He was innocent and all of
Yeah, he
that.
wasn't even into life, I don't think.
No, Tommy was a good kid. He really was. But Tommy was related to another guy in our family. His name was Noel Modica. He was related to Noel Tommy. I think they were cousins.
Okay.
They were cousins, and yeah. So it was a sad situation for me, because I knew what was going on. But there was guys that were around Robert with that crew that I didn't like to begin with. Like
Right.
Danny could tell you, I never had respect for Danny. Danny, to me, he wasn't a street guy, and you know, I never had no respect for that guy. Um, his son-in-law, his son-in-law and stuff like that, John and them, people would tell me that they were talking about this, talking about that. They couldn't kill me on their fucking best day, So I just leave it alone, though. Here's what I want to get out there. Here it is. They know exactly who killed their friend in 1996. This is. They know exactly who killed their friend. Yet all these years later, they call this guy their friend. Nothing has ever been done. So what does that tell you?
Kind
What
of
does that
friends
tell
are
you?
really, yeah.
Not only that, what kind of friends it is, but that's the bottom line. And they know exactly who it is who did it. They know, but the bottom line is the person who is responsible for it, they're deathly afraid of.
Right.
And that's the bottom line. What good reason? I got to tell you, what good reason? But it is what it is. But here you are, you're in this life. You're calling yourself that this is your brother, this is your friend. And meanwhile, you're talking so many years ago now, and nothing's been done.
And you mentioned after this, you went on the lam for a little while. Did you go down to Florida?
Well, yeah, I was on. So now I was everywhere. I was in. Let's see. I was in California. I was in Vegas. I was in the Midwest. I was in Florida.
Were they actively looking for you at this point, or you just
Yeah,
the heat coming
yeah,
down?
yeah. I'll
Plus,
tell you
the
what
other shit
happened.
with the family.
No, 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 no. What happened was they were actively. I had law enforcement actively looking for me. What happened was, um, after Robert was murdered, I get called into my parole officer maybe 2 weeks later,
Mm-hmm.
3 weeks later. I had just seen my parole officer say 3 days ago. All of a sudden, he comes. I open up my apartment. I had an apartment in Staten Island. I open up my apartment door. I walk in. There's a business card on the floor for my parole officer. It says, call me immediately. So I call him right up. I said, what can I do for you? He goes, listen, he goes, we're doing all of our paperwork over here in the new office. He goes, I need you to come in first thing. I don't know what day it was. I think it was a Friday or a Monday. It was a Monday. It was a Monday. I want to tell you why. It was a Monday. We were planning to do a bank burglary in Queens. Me, Tommy Dono, Benny, and Gerard. And I had already got us a work car to take there that weekend. So it was a Friday that I got the message to be at parole on Monday. So that whole weekend, we were supposed to do the bank burglary on Sunday night going into Monday morning. So that Monday morning, so I told everybody, listen, I got to be hot. For this to happen, I'm definitely hot. So I don't want to get the score room. We all need the fucking money.
Yeah.
So what happens is I give them the work car because I got the work car. I gave it to them. Monday morning, I go to parole. They go do the bank burglary Sunday night. I don't go. So for case I'm being followed, anything, I'm not getting anybody pinched. I'm good. Monday morning comes. I go to parole. I walk in. Another crew member of ours who's around Nikki. His name was Mario Casarino, made member of the Gambino crime family. Mario walks in and he looks at me. He goes, it's just me and Mario in the waiting room. He goes, you got to get the fuck out of here. I said, why? He goes, there's two fucking agents downstairs. They're coming up right now and they were talking about you. I heard them when I was coming up. He goes, they're coming to pinch you. I said, you got to be fucking kidding me. So now Mario gets called into the parole office. And in the parole office, you're locked in. You're buzzed in. You got to get buzzed in and out. So I'm sitting there. They get buzzed in. They come in, these two guys. They both look at me. I look at them. They ask for my parole office. My parole officer lets them in. Now all three of them are looking at me through the glass, and I'm sitting there. So I guess they figured they had me in pocket. I'm not going nowhere. Some other kid gets buzzed in to come in for his parole visit. I fucking took those stairs, fucking 10 at a time. Boom, 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 boom. I go, I get out of the fucking building, I get into the car, I drive away. So I called Jojo Carrazzo because he became an attorney. So I called Jojo and I told Jojo, listen, I got a bad situation here. I said, I went to parole. The agents were looking for me there. I spoke to Mario. This is what happened. We need to get to the bottom of it, of what it could be. Because you got to remember, I'm on parole. I'm robbing banks. I'm robbing drug dealers. My friend just got murdered. They could be there for anything
That's a
or
long
everything.
fucking list.
Yeah. So they could be there for everything. So he calls the parole officer, and the parole officer says, listen, we don't know what you're talking about. He goes, he ran out of here on parole. So if he's not back by the end of the day, I got no choice but to violate him. So Jojo, will never forget, Jojo tells him, well, listen, if you're going to tell me fucking fairy tales, good luck finding him. And hangs up on him. And that was it. I was on the run there for ever since then. And then I left there. I went to Vegas. I was in California. And then from time to time, the bosses would call me in. They would call me in for certain things. And I was robbing and stealing while I was on the run. And I was doing whatever. I was shaking down drug dealers, still doing it all because I needed to survive.
Right.
And when I ran out of parole that day, I drove to Rikers Island. Dear friend of mine, his name is Fat Sal. Fat Sal. Fat Sal was a bank robbery legend. Fat Sal owned a pizzeria right outside the exit of Rikers Island when you come over the bridge. I go there to his pizzeria and I tell Fat Sal, listen, I'm going on the run. I'll see you soon, but I'm gone. I said my goodbyes to him. He let me know that they touched down with the score. I left there. I went to go meet Benny and Tommy. They hit me off with money from the score. I put the money in my pocket and I took off. And that's when I was officially on the run. And then I was active running around. I was in every state that you could imagine. I was everywhere. And
And
then I would,
I talked off air. That's an enormous amount of pressure, knowing that you're on the run, you're looking for you, and it's you don't know where it's coming from, so you can't even enjoy a day.
no. And not only that, I got these other crime families looking for me because I'm beefing at the time with the Lucchese's because of the thing with Robin.
Right.
I got a problem. I got a problem at the time over money with Wild Bill Sr. And it's a very, very stressful time for me. It really is. And all I can tell you, brother, is that I'm here. I'm fortunate to be here. And if I die tomorrow, at least I die tomorrow knowing that I lived 30 years longer than I was supposed to.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. And so I don't take anything for granted. But it was probably the most stressful time. Going to prison wasn't half as stressful as that time period.
Oh, I can believe it. And I think there was a story one time where you came back to town. I don't know. I don't remember the specifics of who you were meeting, but your mom followed you to the meet, and
Oh
she was
yeah, yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
fucking
I
heat
came.
because she thought you
Yeah,
were
yeah.
going
Well,
in to
I'll tell
go
you
to
what.
prison.
So what happened was there was a wise guy with the Genovese crew, and me and his daughter were dating at the time, and we were talking about marrying each other. She was a very good girl. She was an amazing woman, and we were talking about getting married. And he was in Allenwood. He was away at the time. Before I got in trouble, I had got permission from my parole officer to actually visit him. And then, of course, everything blew up because I was in trouble. It never came to roost that I went there. But what happened was when I came back to town, I got a phone call from a third party who knew us both. And I took the phone call and he said, "Listen, kid, we got to meet." I said, "Okay." And he wanted to meet on Ocean Parkway in Brooklyn. So I went, but unbeknownst to me, my mother was listening in on the conversation. And I got to know my mother. My mother's in a position where she knows that I have trouble with these people. She knows I can't trust nobody. She's, me and my mother very close. So she knew. And unbeknownst to me, I go to the meeting and I meet him. We give each other a hug and we're sitting there talking. It's the middle of the afternoon. And he said that, he says, "Listen," he goes, "Barry wanted to send a word to you that it's not about you as a person. You're a good man." He goes, "I was the first guy to tell him that if I had something to do, I'd want you to be kicking down the door with me. But he doesn't want that for his daughter.
Right.
You have problems that you might not come back from." He goes, "Let's be real." He was real. I said, "I know." He goes, "You might walk away from here and you might die. We both know that," he said. I said, "Yeah, you're 100% right." I says, "I got nothing but respect for Barry. So you tell Barry, I'm done. I'm good. We're good." And I turn around and there's that woman sitting maybe not even 10 feet away, just staring at us, rocking, rocking, rocking. And I look a second time. Man, I got the chills. I didn't know. It was the first time in my life I didn't know what to do. I was like, uh, uh, and I looked at him, and I don't know if he's seeing it in my face, but the only thing that I could think of is I like him, but there's a good chance that I'm going to have to kill him in broad daylight right here. My first instinct was, okay, listen, if he sees her, she's got a gun, and she's ready to shoot him. That's a guarantee.
Yeah.
But I'm saying if he sees her, then I got to react. And it would have been fair for him, of course. He would have got a bad decision, but it's my mother, bro. There's
Yeah.
no half step. He's done.
Yeah.
And so he kisses me. I hug him. He goes his way. I just walked over to her. And that's when I knew it was the end, bud. Right there was the end.
Mm-hmm.
Right there. My
And
mother's in the street with a fucking gun in her hand. That life is over for me. It's a wrap.
and
And
how long before that did you get arrested?
then, let's see. Then what happened was they called me in because of a certain situation right there. So maybe about a day or two after that, I go to meet them. I see them. At the meeting is when the agents spot me. What happens is the guy that I meet, his name is Lenny, Nikki's partner.
Mm-hmm.
I meet Lenny DiMarino. I meet Lenny at the diner, not the diner, the Chinese restaurant um, on Flatbush Avenue. I meet him there. China New Star. That's where I met him. I met him at the China New Star. We sat down, we were talking, and he was telling me that Nikki was pinched at the time as well already. Nikki was pinched. And he tells me that, Nikki's going to need help with lawyers. He knows you're doing this other shit here. He's asking if you're going to kick in to help with his lawyer. And I'll never forget it. I looked at Lenny. I was like, Lenny, he's a fucking millionaire. I'm on the run. He said, now I love Lenny. I would have did anything Lenny asked me to do. It would have been a no-brainer. I said, Len, if you need the money, I give it to you. But we both know he don't need it. He said, listen, if he asks you for it, you got to do it. I said, I understand. I knew it was unfair. Then he asked me about some drug dealers that I had, guys that I was shaking down or whatever. He was asking me for their names, all things that were making my antennas go up.
Mm-hmm.
He was asking me things that I knew that meant that I was a dead man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's what happened. And I walked away from that meeting, but unbeknownst to me, the FBI is down the block. They pinch Lenny. He gets arrested about a day after that meeting. And he got arrested for a different case. He got nothing to do with mine. But they got a drop on me. And then when they came to my house, I'll never forget what the agent said. He said, Andrew, you're the last one. He goes, it took us a minute, but you're the last one. And that was it. And then he goes, listen, they called me with I had a license in a different name. And it was totally legit. I went for a road test and everything. I had a birth certificate, a new name, social security card, the whole bit. And the agent was pretty nice to me. He comes over, they got me on my couch at the apartment, and he got me handcuffed. And he goes, Andrew, you got so many fucking problems. This one's on us. And he puts the license in his pocket. He goes, this one is on us. I said, oh, you're a fucking sport. I said, you're a fucking sport. And then that was it. They took me away. And then when I went in front of the federal magistrate the next day, that's when the agents, they said, listen, Your Honor, if he gets bail, he's a dead man. And he knows that he's not going to live the week if he gets bail. And the judge says, well, I would still give him bail. He says, but I can't give him bail because he has a state parole hold. So he's going to have to stay in regardless. And then that was it. And then the rest is history. Then I made the decision a few months later, and I would make the decision based off what I was seeing and what was going on. But I knew I was dead. I knew that they were counting the hairs on my ass. It was time.
Yeah.
And I've been, listen, don't get me wrong. I've been involved in tons of violence, but I couldn't win that battle, bro. There was no winning that battle. There was no winning it. So that was it. And then that was a whole different chapter,
Right. Yeah,
dealing
we'll
with the
have to
government.
have you back on again to kind of dive into that because, like, we've only
Yeah.
scratched the surface here. How long did you have to do before everything was done, settled trials and all that stuff?
Well, let me see. With the feds, I did 48 months. The state had given me max on my violation. They gave me 8 years.
Wow.
The federal government was trying to get me out of prison, and the state wouldn't allow it. I never forget what the parole woman said at the meeting. She said, he shoots people. He's an organized crime member. He will not ever step foot in New York ever again. She saved my life, that lady, because if I would have got bail, they would have killed me.
Yeah.
So wherever she is, I hope she's doing good. She saved my life, that lady. And that's it. And but it was sad, listen, I turned, after seeing the writing on the wall, I made the best decision that I can make, to get my life back. And, when I think about it, I had to turn into something that I grew up hating. But at the end of the day, I realized that there was no love for me there anyway. So who am I protecting? People who are looking to kill me regardless. So what is it? What are you doing at that point? At least now, these last so many years, I was able to actually do good with the people that I loved and the people in my life and shit like that. Shit I would have never had a chance with ever if, it would have went the other way.
And you also wrote a book, Surviving the Mob.
Yeah. And I did, it was a very interesting journey to do that because I never had no knowledge to do anything like that. As a matter of fact, I turned it down twice to do it. And then I met the right guy and it turned out to be very, very good for me because it was like therapeutic for me to get it out, to put it behind me
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And if it could send a decent message to help one person, I'm good. I'm not going to save the world with my life. The only reason why my story is even remotely this interesting is because I lived. If I died, who the fuck's going to talk about me?
Right. You're able to tell the story. And that's what makes things like these podcasts so compelling, is because you're getting it straight from, the horse's mouth. A lot of the podcasts that you do on guys in the street, and they're either no longer with us because they're in prison for life, or they got killed. And
Yeah.
there's only so much
Listen,
you
I
can
got very
say.
lucky
Yeah.
because, yeah, I got very, very lucky because, listen, call it what you may. I would have did whatever I needed to do to try to survive, but in the long run, I can't miss once. They can miss 100 times. I can't miss once.
Exactly. Yep.
You're fighting an army. You know what I mean? It's a different story, but it is what it is.
Well, man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on the show, man. Hell of a story. We'll probably have to have you back for a part two because there's so much that we couldn't even fit in. But I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of
Anytime,
get the
brother.
basis of it. And
Anytime. You reach out anytime. It'd be my pleasure.
any
It was a
any
pleasure to
social
meet you.
media? Oh, thank you. Likewise, my friend. Any social medias or anything you want to plug where they can get your book? Anything before we get out of here?
Yeah, just go on Amazon, go to Barnes and Noble if there's still one around. You go and do that stuff. I'm pretty much long gone from it. I got some things in the works that I'm trying to do. When the time is right, I'll bring them to your attention,
Absolutely.
and we can get those things out there. Right now, I'm just a working man doing what I got to do to, and I like it. I really do. I like it. I never thought I would because it was the scariest fucking day of my life, but I do. It's
Well,
doing well.
I'm glad you're doing well, my friend, and I appreciate you coming on Crime and Entertainment and sharing your story. I really do, and I hope everything is continued much blessed and success for you, my friend.
You as well, and I'm glad things worked out for you as well. That was a hell of a story you told me earlier.
Oh yeah, 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 and I'm working on getting some. I'm possibly doing a book thing as well, so you never know. But I'll send you some links to the story that way you can catch the whole
Without a
thing.
doubt, yeah. Send it to me. See, I'm interested in that stuff. Send it to me. Yeah, we'll be in touch, but I'll reach out to you during the week.
Yeah, for sure. All right, buddy. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Hollywood Wade. That was Andrew DiDonato, and unfortunately, we are out of time. Tune in next week for an all new episode of Crime and
See
Entertainment.
you later,
Andrew,
brother.
we appreciate it, my
Peace.
friend. Bye.